Welcome to Turing Rabbit Holes podcast with Gabriel Hesch and Alex Alanis. Today we have the pleasure of talking to Professor Pagan of Westchester University. He has a PhD in pharmacology with an emphasis in neurobiology, and today we're going to be talking about psychoactive drugs from planarian flatworms all the way to the human brain because they have the same essential biochemistry. And so all the things that we can learn from flatworms, which can be spliced in half or even spliced as many as 200 times and regrow 200 different copies. From flatworms, we'll extend the conversation to other mammals such as dolphins and humans with respect to treating addiction and other mental disorders.
Without further ado, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go to your website, and I think even on this video podcast, we'll even show a screenshot of going to your website. I want to talk about some of your, that's your Twitter page. Let me go to your website right now. It's Bald Scientist, is that right?
Baldscientist.com.
Okay, cool.
So let's go look into the books.
Cool, yeah, let's go to the books. This book is exciting. If I go in reverse order, the first book that I see here is The First Brain, The Neuroscience of Planarians. Fascinating. Can you tell us about this book?
Absolutely. That book was my first writing project, and it had an interesting story too, because about maybe 2012 to 2011, I have to go back. In 2009, I got kind of the idea of thinking about writing a book. And then I started educating myself on the topic. And almost everyone advised me to blog first, because I have a lot of experience writing technical papers and my thesis and my dissertation, things like that. But trying to translate that into popular science, which is what I wanted to do, it took a little bit of tweaking. So I established my blog. My original website was boldscientist.wordpress.com. And I started blogging. That was in 2010. Okay. In 2012, I, for the first time, decided to write a proposal. Again, I don't have an agent. I still don't have an agent, but if you have an agent in the audience who's looking for a really cool guy, so I'm here, just so you know. And I'm the kind of person that whose philosophy is that if I don't ask, the answer will always be no. Yeah. Right? So that's what I thought. So I started sending proposals to different places. Oh, and I wasn't very good at titles at the time. The working title of The First Brain was The Neuronal Worm. That was horrible. Horrible. And thank God a colleague of mine suggested The First Brain, and it worked out pretty well. So one publisher, academic publisher, I'm not going to mention it. Well, they rejected the proposal and they said, no, it's not good for us and whatnot. So I kept sending it to places, and a very obscure publisher called Oxford University Press picked it up. Okay. And one thing led to another. And basically The First Brain, it's an excuse to teach pharmacology and neuroscience, brain science, using the flatworm that I use in my research as a main character, if you will. Okay. Yeah. Even though it was published by an academic press, it's more like a popular science book because I start from the basics. And I had a lot of fun with it. And I explain some of the research that I do. I explain what the brain is, what the brain does, things like that, but at a popular level. But I'm very proud of that. That was my first non-academic publication.
Nice. You know, as you're saying this, I actually really, really enjoy you talking about your story of how you go from academic language and, being a prolific publisher in academia to going to the popular science. Now, let me tell you why. I think right now there's a wealth of scientists out there who have a desire to do that, but haven't yet, blazed that trail that you've blazed. There's certainly some out there, but you are in the middle of it right now. So not only is this episode for people who just want to hear other science podcasts, but this episode almost could be marketed to people who maybe want to start a podcast in science or some other niche. This almost inspires me to I've been wanting to make a Discord server for content creators. Maybe we should do that and attract people who are subject matter experts, and you know, you could have your tips and tricks for them, such as start off with a blog and learn the lingo of popular science. So very cool, very cool, very cool.
You know what? I'm going to make a proposal for you right now, because I'm planning to do an episode on of my podcast precisely about popular science writing.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. I'd love that. I'd love that. That'd be very cool. Yeah. And actually, I'd say Alex has a little more experience. I mean, I'm happy to. Definitely happy to. Alex has a little bit more experience than I do. I just jumped right in, and I think we got lucky in a few instances. But I'd be happy to be on that episode for sure. For sure. So very cool.
So, just can we get a little bit? I'm curious as to what's inside your book. You're talking about pharmacology and neuronal warm, which is what the original title is, right? Can you just give me a little bit of how does that progress to? I see the picture going to the first. It looks like our brain, looks like a human brain. So you go from a worm to our brain and evolution. Do you follow the evolutionary path?
Yeah.
And how does doing your drug research help? Or what is it? What's the connection?
Okay, so that's another really cool story, because I did my PhD in a physical chemistry lab. Okay, so it was my late advisor. He was a really great guy. He was at Cornell University, and he was a hardcore physical chemist. But he was also in the pharmacology program, and I decided to join his lab. Okay, so I was characterizing the dopamine transporter and its interaction to cocaine using a cell line and biophysical biochemical methods. Okay, but I've always loved biology, but I never took zoology. I knew about planarians, but I never worked with them or anything like that. While I was in my while my PhD, while I was doing my PhD, which incidentally, I was a non-traditional student. I went back to school at 35 to do my PhD. So, and what I saw in 2001, a paper in which they were able to get planarians, the flatworms that I'm talking about, addicted to cocaine, right? And that got my eye, because you wouldn't think that flatworm, okay, was so similar. The physiology of a flatworm was so similar to our own physiology. And apparently it was. So I went to my advisor and I said, well, George, we have to test it in the lab. This is a good model and whatnot. But of course, he was a physical chemist. He actually said, well, no, when you have your own lab, you can do it. And that's precisely what I did. Yeah. So, but then again, as I said, I knew next to nothing about flatworms. I began educating myself, and how to, keep them, where to get them, all these type of things. At the same time, I was characterizing certain compounds that ended up being antagonists of cocaine in the cell line system that I was working on. Okay. And actually, I don't know if you can see that I have a tattoo in my arm.
Okay. Yeah.
This is a cocaine antagonist that we characterize in our laboratory. Yeah. I can send you a picture of it. It's called parthenolite. And it works in planarians as a behavioral antagonist of cocaine. Okay? Meaning that whatever effects cocaine induces in the behavior of planarians are counteracted by parthenolite. All right? I associated myself later on with an electrophysiologist from the University of Puerto Rico, a friend of mine, and that compound does work on rats. Okay, essentially, I'm trying to solve addiction, because the addiction is very complex. It's more like trying to alleviate the toxicity of cocaine. Okay, and that's the first step, doing the pharmacological characterization. Ever since that, I've tested a few other compounds, not only with cocaine. I've tested nicotine and many other compounds, and I'm getting into regeneration, because planarians are the kind of worms that you can cut their heads off, and they will grow every part of their bodies, including a brain, in the right way. Can you imagine how would it be like if we ever learn how to do that?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, that's critical as we have an aging population. Regeneration of brain is, something that I think there's a lot of interest and a lot of different approaches to it at the moment. Stem cells, and now I'm hearing from this, using the model from the worm that does regenerate itself.
Regenerating your brain. That is, the philosophical and science fiction implications. Wow.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Wow. That's, wow. Sorry. I'm just in awe right now. I don't.
Let me give you more reasons to be in awe. If you if you cut a planarian, I don't know, in 200 pieces, okay? If you keep them and nourish them, each piece will regrow a new worm. Okay, so which one was the real worm? Okay, so and that opens the again, pun absolutely intended, the proverbial can of worms about all this stuff.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so I'm curious about scientific explanations for that. I mean,
So I'm going to have to pass that to my daughter. She's a junior in college. She's going to get an undergrad in biology, but she's really vectoring towards ecology. She's looking at climate change, and she has a somewhat of a physics and math background, and she's working these kinds of labs and these kinds of issues, and she's always thinking about projects. So I'm going to have yet another project for her to think about.
I'll be happy to talk. I get requests all the time from undergrads, high school students, and and I love spreading the word about planarians.
awesome. Oh, that's incredible. Okay, so I mean, I have so many questions I want to ask you about this book in particular, especially with respect to what you learned or what your colleagues have learned about treating some mental ailments. I think I had told you in our Twitter conversation that among my very, very close circle of friends, without naming any names, I have friends who have crippling bipolar disorder. To the extreme. It's very hard to explain, but also friends who are schizoaffective. And I'm very happy to say that in both instances, these individuals have gotten very, very successful treatment. For those who are watching this show, in the case of like bipolar disorder, individuals where if you're on an extreme low, there is this like fear and this paranoia that you can't do anything right. Like if you're counting back change at a supermarket, suddenly you're paranoid that you can't do it right, and you might make a mistake. But then you suddenly have this terrorizing fear that the cops are after you because you stole your groceries because you didn't count your change right. I'm trying to describe it, a very real scenario. We know those who are, should we say, not experiencing depression. Of course, that's ridiculous. But you don't know that if you're having a crippling depressive episode, or if it's a manic episode. I mean, anybody can Google search these kinds of things. A good friend of mine thinks that they can conquer the world on a manic episode. You don't have an accounting for how much money you have, and you spend money on you aren't keeping track of how much money you've spent. Like you'll start one project at the house, and then you'll start another project at the house, and it's crazy. You will quickly run out of resources and not realize it. In fact, one of my friends thought that they could heal people just by being in the same room and sharing their optimistic energy. So it's crazy. Now, I know that this could be a whole podcast in and of itself talking about the whys. In their treatment was electroconvulsive therapy. I don't know how familiar you are with the research. It was fantastic. It was these individuals have gone on to be very, very productive, have gotten their doctorate and are now publishing and practicing as a doctor. So it's very impressive to see the treatments, but I'm curious about some of what you've learned about treating these or other ailments.
Absolutely, and it's remarkable that it works because, you are engineers and an engineer and a physicist, right?
Yes.
You know that the more moving parts a certain contraption is, the more prone it is to break down. Okay, yep. So we have a nervous system, which in humans has about maybe 86, 90 billion, with a B as in all scientists, nerve cells. Okay, so I always, and each of those nerve cells can form up to an average of 30,000 connections with other nerve cells. Okay, so the complexity layers keep getting, well, more complex. So it's no wonder that there's mental disease and conditions like the ones you're describing. It's even more wonderful that there's no more of it, as it were. Okay,
Yeah.
so and planarians, even though they are not useful for, I don't know, bipolar disorder, things like that, have been studied as a model of anxiety. Okay, so and they do that by testing whether they want to go to the illuminated side of a petri dish or to the dark side, meaning that these flatworms, they are not big, they are not fast, they are not venomous. What do? Hide. Okay, so they tend to go to the dark side. On the rocks, things like that. But if you give them Prozac, they don't care.
Wow. You can give Prozac to flatworms. Things I didn't learn. I'm gonna tweet that.
Yeah, I didn't do that particular research, but I've read the papers, and
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's a powerful model. But going back to the complexities and wonderful idea of the brain, it's one of my main interests. It's something that it's so unknown right now. And you mentioned, for example, electroconvulsive therapy. It does work, but why does it work? We don't know exactly. It's like a reset, factory reset, as it were.
As a reminder, that was therapy that was used in the 50s, I remember, but abused in the 50s. Is
Yes.
that what we're talking about? And now it's come back, and it's come back much more scientifically and well used.
Yes. I don't believe in anecdotes. Am I about to use an anecdote? It's been a literal lifesaver for my friends. Like, medicine didn't work. There was no treatment that worked. And to get my friends out of this depressive state. And they were like, once all of the medicines didn't treat them, and it was literally months and months have gone by, they did ECT, and it was a lifesaver. So that's all I can say. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, so wow, there's just, oh man. So if any of our readers or our viewers or listeners want to read more, the book is called The First Brain, The Neuroscience of Planarians by Dr. One R. Pagan. And forgive me if I mispronounce things, I'm very bad about it. Thank you, I'm so glad. Now you've got other books as well, and I figured just in the interest of time, we'll talk about a few of your other books. Your next book is called Strange Survivors. I didn't read as much about Strange Survivors as I did about The First Brain because of my interest in the brain. But can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote this and a few tidbits that someone might read in the book?
Absolutely. That one, I'm full of interesting stories. Okay, so that one has an interesting story too. Once I got the proverbial writing bug, I decided to write another popular science book. But then my idea was to write a book about how venoms or toxins could be used in medicine. And I was going to title To Kill and to Cure. Okay, so that's a really cool thing and whatnot. So I began writing it kind of halfway. Both the publishers and I got wind that there was a book about venoms and toxins, not about medications, but just venoms and toxins to be published elsewhere. Okay, and we kind of freaked out. I am very grateful that my publisher, the one that published Strange Survivors, they didn't drop me or anything. The editor called me and he said, "We want to keep you as a writer. Can you give us like an alternate, topic for a book?" And I started thinking about it, and I came up with this idea of writing a book about weird strategies of organisms that allow them to survive in nature. And I go beyond pause or speed, things like that. I talk about venoms. I snuck venoms in a few chapters. I talk about bioelectricity. I talk about several different things, weird strategies, okay, including regeneration, which is one of the things. So I kind of condensed that, and that I had a lot of fun in that sense, because that book is bona fide popular science. And my experience as a professor helped me a lot, because one of the courses that I teach at the university, it's general biology for non-majors. Okay,
Wow.
so in a given semester, I have a room of 300 people almost, full of English majors, literature majors, I don't know, nursing majors, non-bio majors. So I have to make the course interesting to those students, but I have to convey the information. Okay, let me give you an example. I can explain enzyme kinetics using Legos as a comparison. Okay.
Nice.
No, I understood enzyme kinetics as differential equations and cascades, but so I'm very interested in your approach.
Cool. You should do like a YouTube video with like animations. That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah. So you know that in enzymology there's two schools of thought, which are probably both will probably be true. One of them is the lock and key hypothesis, meaning that the substrate has a three-dimensional shape complementary to the enzyme pocket, right?
Yes.
The second idea extends the lock and key hypothesis with the induced fit hypothesis, all right? And I use Legos to illustrate that example. Legos need to, the pieces of a Lego, I don't know if I have to say, if I can say Lego, it's a trademark or whatever.
I'm not worried about it. It's probably not a problem. Play blocks,
Yeah.
whatever. It's fine.
So, yeah. So the two pieces of the toy, okay, they need to have complementary shape, but that's not enough. You have to give it a little push for them to click it in place. Okay, that's how I use those toys to explain parts of enzyme kinetics. Okay,
Cool.
so and I don't go into differential equations and whatever first because I haven't seen them in ages, and second, I'm talking to students who've never taken those equations.
No, correct. And I was in a graduate biochemistry course one time in my life, and a researcher was using Excel to approximate enzyme kinetics, and he showed me the equation, and it was a differential equation, and it was fun. I solved it for him, and it was just an interesting problem.
Yeah, very cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know we were talking about elements in the book Strange Survivors, and that was one of them. So cool, man! I want to get all of these books now. Seriously, this looks really cool.
So I would imagine that past or before COVID that you would get clusters of students after class to come talk to you and just continue these conversations. And that's one of the things I miss. I used to teach when I was up at Los Alamos, and there's an extension of University of New Mexico up in Los Alamos, is after the class. Because then you get the people who really took your lesson and really want to go beyond it, and it's just so rewarding.
You're absolutely right. It got a little weird in March when the university closed and everything transitioned to remote learning.
Yes.
So I felt weird lecturing to a computer screen, okay, in my dining room. But we adapted, and that's why the way we're doing it right now. Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So, alrighty. Now, before we move on to the next book, anything else that you'd like to talk about? Any other interesting facts or hooks that you'd like to share from Strange Survivors?
Well, there's a few of them. In the very cover, there's the oh brother, the can I start again?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, because the name of the okay, in the cover itself of the book, there's the mantis shrimp.
Yes.
Okay, which is not a shrimp or a mantis, a praying mantis, but they call it like that. So that little guy has a visual system that outworks everything, our visual system. For example, we have 4 kinds of photoreceptors. Most people have 4 kinds of photoreceptors in the back of our eyes. Okay, 3 for color and 1 for black and white, quote unquote. All right. So the mantis shrimp has, I think it has about 14 to 15 different photoreceptors. Okay. We can perceive about 100,000 different colors, which are essentially wavelengths. Okay. The mantis shrimp has a much wider range of perception, as it were. We cannot imagine how the mantis shrimp can see. because it will be able. It's like when you read about honeybees that can see in the ultraviolet, okay,
Yes.
or pit vipers that have the organ under their eyes to detect infrared. So we
Yes.
cannot even imagine how that feels like, and that's an interesting philosophical problem. Okay, so what is it like to be a bat? Remember that essay? Okay,
Yes.
so to perceive the world in sound waves, or like a dolphin by echolocation. Okay, so all of those mechanisms, weird mechanisms of survival, which are markedly different from ours. Because in our case, we humans, we are not the biggest, we are not the fastest. Okay, we don't have venoms. We don't, so what set us apart? Intelligence is one thing, but that's not the whole story, because one-on-one, one person, it doesn't matter how smart she is, okay? Against a saber-toothed tiger, game over, okay? We combine our smarts with cooperation, okay? We learn how to talk to each other and to organize ourselves, and for good, bad, or ugly, well, look at the world right now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, it's definitely an emergent property that we became social animals as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love emergent properties. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. There's other. I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask this, but when we talk about intelligence and we talk about how do we quantify intelligence. Now, it's funny is actually Dr. Alex Alanis has a paper for a way of quantifying intelligence aside from the IQ test. I'll have to send you that paper afterwards.
So very briefly, an IQ test to me is a number that falls on a bell curve, and that's just seems to be too little information to quantify intelligence. And the approach I'm trying to develop, and I work for the Air Force, and maybe human factors people might be interested in it, is one can imagine some experts designing a test in the future that's graphical, in where you associate words with pictures, and it's standard set of words, standard set of pictures, and you might give it to, say, first graders, and they will connect graphs. And then you might give the same set to seventh graders or postdocs, and clearly the complexity is going to grow, and there are mathematical ways to characterize the complexity of these networks and graphs. Algebraic topology, how many two-dimensional holes, three-dimensional holes, etc. And maybe have a spectrum of these algebraic topology tools. They're just computational tools that characterize. The graph is to see the progression of education, maybe see poor schools versus rich schools, a smart MD versus an MD maybe you shouldn't work with, or but definitely capture it in a much more graphical way. And in your field, the physicists have showed up, and they're beginning to map networks of the brain. And just like I can project a three-dimensional cube onto a two-dimensional plane and rotate it around, a two-dimensional being will mathematically understand 3D. It turns out in a similar way, we have 10, 11 dimensional networks in our brain under MRI. And so graphical methods of capturing intelligence might be the way, and it might be the path towards artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And that's not just a tangent. The reason why I brought that up is because you had brought up intelligence, and then you brought up the jump from intelligence to cooperation, and then I was going to talk about what we think we understand about is it octopi or octopuses?
Actually, I learned about that. It's octopuses.
Okay, octopuses. Okay.
And we can talk about it when we talk about the book number 3 that's coming up, because I learned it in my research for that one.
This is an interesting one here. Okay, I'm going to read the title of the third book of yours. It's called Drunk Flies and Stoned Dolphins, A Trip Through the World of Animal Intoxication. And that is tentatively going to be published on May 2021 as of now.
Yeah, that's kind of the tentative date, but I'm sure it's going to be pushed back a little bit more. I'm pretty much done with the book, but I'm polishing it and everything. But again, everybody's homeschooling kids. You can relate to this, so everything is getting slowed down. But I'm having a lot of fun with that book, because I'm integrating pharmacology, which is kind of my main thing, with a few ideas about organisms that are not so different from us. Okay,
Yes.
so the drunk flies part. Let me tell you a couple of stories. If may I?
Sure. Oh, definitely, definitely.
So, did you know that male fruit flies, the fruit flies that, are around, the
Yes.
male, when they fail to get female companionship, okay, they prefer fermented fruits to normal fruit.
Interesting.
Yeah, they drown their
Yeah.
sorrows in alcohol. Okay, and I'm not making fun of addiction. It's a very serious problem, but we can use animals like that to illustrate this phenomenon. So in the book also, I talk about the story of a few people who, for whatever the reason, which I never was able to figure out, they gave alcohol to elephants. Okay, we're talking about drums. What's more dangerous than a bull elephant? A drunk bull elephant. Okay, and they had a lot of stories that they have to get up in the jeep and speed away from the raging bull elephant, drunk, things like that. Okay, and I have a lot of examples of organisms that actually seek out psychoactive substances. Okay, and not humans, not
Okay.
humans.
Right, so like bears eating fermented berries maybe, or birds doing the same thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Oh, wow. How cool. And then with dolphins, don't they get high off of pufferfish, I believe?
Yes, that's kind of the idea because the main information that we have is that we know that certain in certain species of dolphin, they get into small pots and they don't eat the pufferfish. They just nibble on it and the pufferfish puffs up, okay? And they pass the fish to each other. And they act as if they were intoxicated. Okay, there's no actual research to actually determine that yet, but pufferfish secrete tetrodotoxin, which is a very nasty toxin. Maybe in dolphins they induce psychoactive states, or maybe they like the tingling sensation that they may get on the, I don't know if they have lips or on their mouths. Just like
Yeah.
people when they eat fugu, the traditional Japanese dish,
Mhm.
because they like the tingling sensation that they get when they eat. But that tingling sensation, if it goes out of hand, it's paralytic, and that's due to tetrodotoxin. Okay, so but there's every indication that dolphins engage in that behavior, whether they are intoxicated or not. I'm sure somebody's researching that right now. But I document the examples. There's many examples. They have seen dolphins of several species. They play with pufferfish.
Wow.
So,
Cool.
yeah.
How
There's
about them?
probably something to the idea that they're maybe getting some effects.
Yeah. Were you going to mention something involving octopuses with this part, with this book?
With this book?
Because I learned that uh, the root of the word is Latin, not Greek. So octopi sounds awesome. It sounds cool, but it's the wrong etymological root. So essentially, it's octopuses.
Okay.
And I learned about that because people have given ecstasy to octopuses.
Oh my gosh. Ecstasy to octopuses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the drug that they use in raves and whatnot.
Yes.
It's really interesting because octopuses by nature are curmudgeons. Okay, they tend to be solitary. Even
Yeah.
reproduction is a risky proposition because either mate will die in the process frequently. Okay,
Yeah.
you give octopuses ecstasy, they get more mellow, more social.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so and octopuses have a brain. They have a brain absolutely different from ours. Okay, their brain wraps itself around their esophagus, their digestive system.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I mean it blows my mind literally because well, not literally, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So there's probably some conservation in at the cellular level, when you think the brain is very different, but some conservation in the biochemistry and at the genetic level possibly.
Oh yeah, no, the neurotransmitters are pretty much the same. My gut feeling is that it's a matter of the circuits, any circuits they may have, which I hope that we get to talk about that later on, because I think that we have to redefine brains, not exactly as what they are, but about what they do.
Correct.
Okay, so
Yeah.
and maybe this is a good follow-up for some of the things that we want to talk about the brain. In 2019, I published a review paper, which is titled "The Brain: A Concept in Flux." Okay,
Cool.
so in which I propose a few things. First, it's not my idea. People have thought about this type of things before, but the whole story is that in 2017, I was invited to the Santa Fe Institute. And I'm sure you know about that.
We know it well. Yes, it's up the street.
Yeah, because I went all fanboy when they invited me because I got to meet Stuart Kaufman. Okay, so I have a picture with them. And I've been reading about the Institute for a while. So anyway, they invited me to a group workshop about liquid brains. So, and liquid brains is the idea that brains don't have to be uh, fixed structures. We talk about beehives, ant colonies, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my contribution to that workshop came up in the review paper as a concept in flux. And I propose, again, it's of course a work in progress. But for example, a microorganism doesn't have any nerve cell, no brain whatsoever, but any microorganism, if it wants to survive, knows how to swim, knows when to swim towards nutrients or away from a toxin, okay, or from a very high temperature, things like that. All right. So that's decision making. All right. So maybe it's not decision making in the as defined by a psychologist, but it's a choice. It's a decision, nevertheless. So as you go up in complexity, we can have, for example, slime molds. Certain species of slime molds, when there's plenty of food, they are single cells. They are amoebas. All right. But
Yes.
when thing gets tough, they coalesce into a single organism. They begin to differentiate. They grow a stalk and reproductive structures. And once they reproduce, well, they go back to their amoeba-like state. So they learn to cooperate. That's I like to call that brains on demand.
No, no. Go ahead. No. I definitely have heard about insect intelligence, and insect intelligence is a method that's used in computer science to find efficient solutions. And of course, you're talking about emergence again, and say how stock markets behave, and what stock markets are made out of lots of individual brains trading, right? And emergence of government, and emergence of how we coordinate. But let's go back to what you were saying.
Yeah. Oh, we're talking about slime molds.
Right. Yeah.
So, slime molds, now that you mentioned that insect intelligence is being used for problem solving, modeling, and whatnot, slime molds are able to solve mazes and all these type of things. In fact, I read a paper in which they were able to make slime molds come up with the optimal solution for this a subway system in Japan. Okay, that for efficiency and speed and things like that. And they don't have a brain either. There's even certain organisms, marine organisms, that when they are in their larval stage, they have a bona fide brain and whatever. Once they develop, they stick themselves at the bottom of the ocean, okay, and they stay there for life. They reabsorb their brain, they don't use their brain anymore, and they live happily ever after. So those are disposable brains. All right. So, and in the paper, I keep developing that idea until I get to super organisms, like again, ant colonies and whatnot, which I describe as brain within brains. Because a tiny ant has a true brain, and you would think that they walk at random and all these things, but when they are in the colony, they act as a single organism. Again, layers upon layers of complexity and emergence.
Right. No, and you're getting to something that I think the converse of that is I'm interested in artificial intelligence, and that is, neural nets that are so popular today, they can solve lots of problems, but they're really quite dumb. I mean, they might be able to drive a car, but they're not thinking about their taxes or a dinner date or planning a tax strategy or whatever it might be. And I have a deep intuition that I'm trying to pursue that graphical methods, once again, can graphs of interconnections, hierarchical graphs, and not just the graphs, but the dynamics associated with it, is the way to move artificial intelligence away from just neural nets, which can solve a lot of problems, to the next level, to general intelligence.
Absolutely. We will need to do some serious multivariate analysis with that.
Right. And definitely use tools of graphical methods, because how is it that you think about your university? You think about the president of the university, the departments, how the money flows, where the grants are, where the NIH is. You have a graphical representation of the universe. We need to start capturing that and the dynamics of that.
Wow. Man, this is so cool. So the only thing I have to add to this is there's this idea that has been brewing in my mind, and I'm sure this is another idea, it's got to be a popular one, where we talk about the emergence of consciousness and artificial intelligence, and we talk about our own evolution. I often had this freaky idea where, if there was another cognition thing that emerged, it's very possible that there's just no possible way that we just would not recognize it, because what we recognize is so dependent on how we were made that it would be impossible to recognize. And that's sort of like a culture shock. When you go from one culture to another, the different ways of doing things just leaves you shocked. So what I'm getting at is this. I thought, if there were some other evolved consciousness, what if, this is just a big what if, with our interconnected, worldwide internet, what if it was possible that there would be some sort of a digital life in the primordial digital ooze that is, like whatever happened to MySpace? Like, MySpace was before Facebook, but, if you've got bots that are individually still active on MySpace or Wikipedia, and you've got things that, somehow, like, it might be possible that there's something that emerges that it's impossible for us to recognize. Everyone would say, Gabriel, that's a stupid idea. Clearly it's not alive. You don't know that.
No, I think people have speculated on, can the internet become conscious in the way you're thinking?
Yeah, we wouldn't recognize it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so in those lines, have you read Arthur C. Clarke's book, Childhood's End?
No. I've read the 2001 series, but not that.
Okay, so Childhood's End is about something pretty much like that. Okay, they in a fictitious future. I really wasn't expecting to talk about this, guys. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So in a distant future, they discover an extraterrestrial race comes to Earth. Okay, and they are received in the expected way. That some people will freak out, some people will not, and whatnot. And it ends up in humanity coalescing into something more. Okay, that a human will not understand, not even the extraterrestrials that came to Earth, because they were like gatekeepers, like they were nursing hyper intelligences, and we were able to become a hyper intelligence, but they wouldn't. It's really cool. It's really cool. And if we talk about the internet becoming conscious, go no further than Terminator, Skynet.
Yeah. It's something I hold near and dear to my heart, professionally.
Yeah.
It's coming. And I'm trying to write papers on Doctrine for the Department of Defense. It's coming.
Yeah, literally in our Google Drive for our podcast, which I will link in this episode, you literally have Dr. Alex Alani's white papers talking about the need for doctrine for such things as we're talking about now. So for those who want more extended reading, there you go.
Yeah, and Asimov laws will not work. Trust me.
Yeah.
No, they will not care about us.
Yeah.
No, you're right. They probably would not.
If you guys want a scary analogy, I was talking to the host of my other podcast, Breaking Math, about this topic, about the idea of hyperintelligence. And we're talking about what would it mean if to experience the next level of intelligence. And I know that this sounds a little out there. But he says, okay, so if there was another level of intelligence where we had more sensory organs that might be connected to the internet, and you have just orders of magnitude of more information, but not only more information coming in, but the ability to meaningfully process it. If you had a hyperintelligence, the difference between the experience of consciousness of a hyperintelligent being and us is kind of like the difference between us and, as you said earlier, slime molds. Think about, do slime molds think about how to do a mortgage? No, that's not even possible for a slime mold to think about a mortgage, nor is it possible for us to even understand what the next level of hyperintelligence would be, if there would be one, or if there's some terminal upper limit to that.
I think the machines are moving faster than the biology, but we are at the moment beginning to interface the brain directly to the internet. And I've heard people talking to each other that are miles apart, or controlling things that are miles apart. So probably in the next few decades, humans are going to experience being connected to the Internet of Things. And that will be something of the flavor that we're talking about.
Yes.
And then the machines will just blow past that, in my opinion.
Yeah, so much to talk about. Now, I know we're a little bit limited on time because I have to pick up my son from the babysitter soon-ish. Okay. However, before we do that, I see there's 3 books here, and if you don't mind me going into this, I can edit this out of the podcast if you'd like. I know on the Amazon page you don't have 3 books, you have 4. Can you tell us about your 4th book? Is it a fiction book?
It's a short story. It's a short story. It's called The Voice of the Heart. Okay. And it's not autobiographical, but it comes from my experience. Let me elaborate. I have 3 kids. Okay, my daughter, she's 29, and I have 2 boys. The 19-year-old who's a techie, the one that I mentioned before, and my 22-year-old has autism. Okay, he's the most delightful person. He's smart. He's sociable. He's a delight. He will also walk in traffic without giving it a second thought. Okay? So that story came up from my musings about, I don't know, as any parent, I'm afraid what's going to happen when I'm not around. Okay? So I toyed with the idea, what if in the far future, a father like me would be able to download his brain or intelligence or consciousness or whatnot into a robot. That robot will be able to take care of his son his whole life.
Wow.
And that's the gist of the story. A couple of things happen. I'm gonna send it to you.
No, I'm sure parents in that situation, that's not an original thought of wishing that they could just be around, right? And in your case, you're thinking about using a robot, but I'm sure that parents all over the world are thinking, what's going to happen, and I wish I could stick around, or I wish I could, my wisdom. I'm the one who most cares, right?
If I would be able to do that, I would in a microsecond.
Yes.
Oh wow, goodness! Oh, that's so deep. I didn't expect that. I didn't know what to expect with that one. But that one tugs at the heart in such a way. Oh, I'd love to read that one.
Yeah, I definitely would like to read that.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot more time right now. But this has been absolutely awesome.
Would you consider doing this in Spanish? Yo hablo español.
Yo también. Yo soy de Puerto Rico.
Podríamos hacer el futuro, ¿verdad?
Absolutamente. Y muchas gracias.
So, is it worth it? I think it might be worth it. There's probably just as many Spanish speakers out there in the world near us, around this, in this side of the world, and then a few on the other side.
Yes, I 100% support that. Heck, if you guys want to, schedule a time. Unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish, but 100% I suggest doing it. That would be an awesome idea.
And I have the contacts to do that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Then in that case, maybe schedule a time next week or the weekend, like anytime.
Right.
I think that would be a phenomenal idea.
And
So-
this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, guys.
Yes.
Completely agreed.
It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to meet you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Total pleasure. Thank you so
Roger that.
much. It's
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure, and I will also make the Discord page too, so that you and us and other scientists who want to blog will do stuff, because that's a great idea. Awesome. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much. I love these guys for the opportunity, and stay out of trouble.
That's right.
And I hope to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Until next time you guys do your Spanish version,
Okay, perfect.
I probably won't be there because I'll just be like, but it's okay.
Alrighty.
It's okay. Okay. All right. You guys take care.
Ciao. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.